Hi, I'm Kate Warren, Director of Global Recruitment Service at Devex, and welcome to my weekly Career Matters video blog. So, the issue of gender equality is a dominant theme across global development. Mainstreaming gender into development programs is pretty common practice, and the benefits for doing so are pretty widely accepted. But it's not even up for debate anymore. But as an industry, do we practice what we preach? I recently participated in an online discussion with The Guardian that asked the question, what does leaning in for women working in development look like? So probably you've either read or heard of the Sheryl Sandberg book from Facebook called Lean In. That sparked a lot of debate over how women should or should not exert themselves in the workplace to have a seat at the table and become part of the leadership of these companies and organizations. And while I think international development is ahead of a lot of other industries as far as female representation at the top, it can often seem just like a sea of typically white men, particularly when you're looking at the leadership of large institutions and NGOs and consulting firms. So some of the challenges that affect women who do work outside the home domestically can become even more magnified when working in a global development context. So for example, one is the amount of and length of travel. So when you work in international development, travel isn't typically a night or two away. It can be a long trip across the world to far-flung corners of the earth. And you might be gone for weeks, maybe even months at a time, which can be really challenging for someone who has a to manage. And travel, of course, affects fathers too. But with women still statistically the dominant caretaker of children, even when they do work outside the home, frequent long periods of travel can just be more challenging for them to juggle than maybe their male counterparts. I myself am the mother of two girls and have to travel frequently overseas. And I remember one trip where I was traveling with colleagues who are both fathers, and I was frequently asked by everyone, "Oh, who's taking care of your kids?" While my male colleagues were never asked this question. And the same for my husband. When I'm traveling overseas, people sometimes act very incredulous that he's left home by himself and how is he going to manage? Surely one of our mothers is flying in to come help him. Yet when he's traveling and I'm home with the kids, nobody asks those kind of questions. And I don't think people are trying to be mean-spirited in asking those questions. I think it just demonstrates that there still is that bias out there that women are the primary caretaker within the household. Uh, Also, in order to advance into leadership positions in global development, professionals typically must spend at least part of their career in the field, and maybe even some of that in a conflict zone, which are typically unaccompanied posts and where your family is not allowed to come along. But even when posted in locations where family can follow, men are typically less likely to follow their wives in the field. That means that their career will need to take a back seat. So some of the international institutions that we work with at Devex and provide recruiting services for say this is a major factor in attracting women to the organization. Most career-driven women tend to pick similarly career-minded spouses, and these field locations oftentimes don't have a big global industry where a spouse can just pop in, find a job right away. So typically moving to the field means that the spouse might have to take a back seat on their career, put their career on hold. And women in leadership positions can oftentimes get stigmatized for spending too much time away from their family, but men also get stigmatized too. And so if they choose to take a backseat in their career or choose to become more the primary caregiver, they often can be penalized for that more so when they try to re-enter the workforce than maybe even women are. And many couples manage this by taking turns. One spouse will take a job for a couple years while the other spouse follows, and then they switch. And this can work well for many couples, but it leaves both couples with gaps in their resume, can make it that both of the careers kind of take a hit. And once again, sometimes those gaps in the resume can hurt men more than women, just because there is that stigma out there that men really should not be taking time off to spend with their family, even more so than women. Uh, at Devex, we work with several of these support groups for large institutions to provide career and support services to spouses of employees that have had to relocate. And they communicate to us that sometimes the men are much more reluctant to seek out this kind of advice, this kind of help, and maybe a little bit more embarrassed that they need help with their career support. So even though there are sometimes support services out there, men might be less likely to take advantage of them. But international work doesn't only affect people who are married or have children. Another international organization that we work with that was having a challenge recruiting women also found a challenge recruiting single women. And these women were hoping to find spouses. Some of the field locations where the positions were located weren't really prime locations for meeting eligible bachelors. So this was actually, one of the contributing factors for them to be reluctant to take on these roles. Uh, and then another challenge that really affects all women in global development is oftentimes you're working alongside other cultures which have different norms and laws and standards uh, against women in the workplace, and women might have a different standing in that society. And so oftentimes expat women can kind of be put in a different class. So they maybe are treated more like their male counterparts. Sometimes they even are kind of in between the standing of a local woman and an expat woman. And it can make there's some really hard dynamics to work with, particularly if you are a manager and trying to manage these teams when you're dealing with all of these different gender biases and norms. And it also makes it hard for local women in these countries who are key in development work and also need a representation and leadership to really move forward. So, how do we solve this gender gap? I'm not going to pretend to have any of the answers, but I do think we should start looking at how, working in global development can really affect really both men and women and their ability to advance their careers, and how as employers and professionals working in this space, we can help to address those. I would love to hear your experiences, any challenges you've had as a woman working in international development, or as a man working alongside women, or maybe a man who chose to take a step back to support his wife's career. And any ideas on policies or programs that could be done to help address this issue, please leave them as comments below. And if you have any comments or questions about managing your career in international development, please tweet me at Devex Careers. Thank you.